The grotesque alien scientist's gnarled hands trembled as he stared at the DNA analysis. Humans were evolving, and the Nasat couldn't allow it. George Ross slammed a magazine into his pulse rifle, the clack echoing through the armory of the Shadow Fox stealth ship. His grizzled face was etched with focus as Admiral Blackwell's hologram flickered to life. "Ross, we have a situation," Blackwell said grimly. "Zephyrian scientists discovered an anomaly in human DNA, something that could make us stronger, smarter, faster. They've locked the research in a biofacility on their homeworld. Your mission is to get in, get the data, and torch the samples. We can't let them use our own genes against us." Ross grunted acknowledgement, strapping on his tactical gear with practiced efficiency. Stakes were high. If the Nasat unlocked humanity's genetic secrets, they could breed super soldiers, engineer viruses to wipe humans out. The future of their species hung by a thread. He boarded the matte black drop shuttle, engines humming. Failure wasn't an option. The Nasat had signed their death warrant the moment they dared to play God with human DNA. Ross would make them pray for mercy, but he had none to give. It was time to show these aliens what true human fury looked like. And it started now. Ross penetrated Zephyria's atmosphere without triggering any alarms, the Shadow Fox's stealth systems masking the tiny drop pod that carried him to the surface. He ejected 2 clicks from the target facility, the pod's impact dampeners absorbing the shock of landing in the dense jungle. The air was thick with humidity, the cries of unknown creatures echoing through the foliage as Ross emerged from the pod. His enhanced hearing picked up the soft footfalls of approaching soldiers long before his eyes spotted their camouflaged forms weaving between the trees. A Nasat patrol. Ross melted into the shadows, ambushing the trio of reptilian commandos as they passed his position. His pulse rifle barked thrice. 3 bodies hit the ground, cauterized holes smoking in their skulls. Quick, clean, efficient. He examined their gear with a frown. This was no ordinary security detail. These were the Nasat's elite operatives. What were they guarding in that facility that warranted this level of protection? Intel had severely underestimated Zephyria's significance. The questions kept coming as Ross approached the compound. The sheer number of military vehicles and personnel far exceeded mission projections. His gut screamed that Command had missed something critical, that there was more going on here than stolen DNA research. He filed that away for later. The mission came first. Ross scanned the perimeter, his cybernetically augmented eyes zeroing in on a drainage pipe on the facility's east side. It was an entry point if he timed it right. He watched, waited, then sprinted for the pipe as the patrols turned, sliding inside and descending into darkness. The pipe twisted and turned, the sound of rushing water masking his movements. Light appeared ahead, the end of the tunnel. Ross emerged into a massive underground chamber and found himself face to face with a sight that sent a chill up his spine. Pods, dozens of them, each one the size of an escape shuttle bearing the Nasat's angular script. What the hell was this place? He planted charges on the nearest capsules, fingers flying over the detonators. Forget stealth, it was time to blow this place sky high and... "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a sibilant voice hissed from behind him. Ross spun, rifle raised, and found himself staring up at an 8-foot reptilian creature in a lab coat. The Nasat scientist seemed just as surprised to see him, its slitted eyes widening as it raised a strange handheld device. "How did you get in here, human?" it demanded. "No matter, you'll serve as a useful test subject." The Nasat's clawed finger stabbed at the device. A sound like 1,000 nails on a chalkboard screeched through Ross's skull, sending him crashing to his knees. He screamed, hands clamped over his ears, but it did nothing to block the debilitating sonic assault. Through tears of agony, he saw the Nasat looming over him, a vicious smile on its lizard face. "Now then," it purred, "let's see what secrets your genes hold, shall we?" Ross gritted his teeth, fighting through the mind-numbing agony that threatened to shatter his consciousness. With a roar of defiance, he pushed through the pain, launching himself at Orin in a desperate tackle. The two slammed into a bank of equipment, sparks flying as delicate machinery crumpled under their combined weight. The sonic device, crushed in the impact, fell silent. Orin thrashed beneath him, but Ross held tight, locking the Nasat in a chokehold. "It's over," he snarled. "You're finished." The scientist laughed, a rasping, gurgling sound. "You're too late, human," Orin hissed. "Your DNA has already given us the key to your species' hidden potential." Ross tightened his grip, eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" Orin's reptilian lips curled in a sneer. He gestured weakly to the pods surrounding them. "Behold the fruits of our labor, an army of Nasat human hybrids birthed from those capsules, each one combining the best of both species, our superior intellect coupled with your brute strength and resilience." A chill ran down Ross's spine as the implications sank in. If Orin was telling the truth, if those pods really contained an army of hybrid super soldiers, "With them we will conquer not only your pitiful species, but the entire galaxy," Orin continued, voice dripping with malice. "And it's all thanks to you." Rage consumed Ross, white-hot and blinding. He slammed Orin against the shattered equipment again and again until the Nasat went limp in his grasp. "Where's the research data?" Ross demanded, shaking Orin roughly. "The DNA samples, the gestation logs, all of it. Where?" Orin said nothing, dazed eyes staring past him. Ross hauled the scientist to his feet, dragging him to the nearest pod. With a snarl, he drove his fist into the capsule's control panel, sending a cascade of sparks raining down on them. Viscous fluid began to leak from the shattered capsule, pooling at their feet. "The data," Ross growled, tightening his grip on Orin's collar. "Tell me, or I'll smash every last one of these damn pods and bury your precious hybrids in the rubble." Orin's eyes widened, fear flickering across his reptilian features. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words died on his lips as a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. The pods were opening. One by one, the capsules hissed and cracked, spilling their contents onto the floor. Hybrid soldiers, each a twisted fusion of human and Nasat DNA, emerged from the artificial wombs, slick with birthing fluids. Orin began to laugh, a sound tinged with hysteria and triumph. "You see?" he crowed. "It's too late. The disturbance has triggered their awakening ahead of schedule." The hybrids, dozens of them, turned towards Ross with eerie synchronicity. Malice glinted in their slitted eyes, a predatory focus that sent a shiver down the operative's spine. "Bring him to me," Orin commanded, voice ringing with authority. "The human is not to be harmed, much. He will make a most valuable test subject for our future experiments." The hybrids advanced, a wall of rippling muscle and gleaming scales, their intent clear. Ross tightened his grip on his pulse rifle, jaw clenched in grim determination. He had come here to destroy this abomination of a project, not become a part of it. But as the first hybrid lunged for him, Ross knew his mission had just become a whole lot more complicated. Ross hurled a smoke grenade into the mass of hybrids, the hissing canister disgorging a thick cloud of obscuring fog. He backpedaled, pulse rifle barking as he fired blindly into the smoke, buying himself precious seconds. His eyes darted around the chamber, searching for an escape. There, a ventilation grate high on the wall. Ross leaped, augmented muscles propelling him upward. He ripped the grate free and hauled himself into the duct. As he crawled, his enhanced hearing picked up the chatter of Nasat soldiers below. "The hybrids have breached the perimeter. They're heading for the spaceport." Ice flooded Ross's veins. If those abominations got off-world, he had to stop them, no matter the cost. Ross kicked out another grate and dropped into a maintenance corridor adjacent to the spaceport tarmac. He sprinted across the open ground, eyes locked on a transport shuttle. The hybrids were already boarding, the engines whining as they spooled up. With a desperate leap, Ross flung himself at the shuttle's landing gear, his fingers scrabbling for purchase on the hydraulic pistons. The shuttle lurched, the ground falling away as it lifted off. Ross clambered up into the cargo bay, coming face to face with the hybrids. Their slitted eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in predatory focus. The largest of them stepped forward, a hulking brute with mottled green scales and a face that was a twisted fusion of human and reptilian features. It cocked its head, studying Ross with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "Human!" it hissed, its voice a guttural rasp. "You dare to challenge us?" Ross raised his rifle, jaw set. "You're not leaving this planet." The hybrid laughed, a harsh bark of sound. "We are the future. You are obsolete." It lunged, moving with blinding speed. Ross was faster. He sidestepped the hybrid's charge and slammed the butt of his rifle into its skull. The creature staggered, shaking its head as if to clear it. "Not bad for a relic," it growled. The other hybrids attacked as one, a wave of fangs and claws and raw, savage strength. The confines of the shuttle became a blur of violence, a brutal dance of strike and counter-strike. Ross fought with everything he had, his pulse rifle forgotten as he grappled hand-to-hand with the monstrous creatures. He was outnumbered and outmatched, but he refused to yield. He was human. He would not break. The lead hybrid seized Ross by the throat, slamming him against the bulkhead. Its grip was like iron, inexorable and crushing. "Why do you resist?" it demanded. "Submit, and your death will be quick." Ross spat in its face. "Go to hell!" The hybrid roared, a sound of pure primal rage. It reared back, ready to crush Ross's skull like an eggshell. A pulse blast took it in the side of the head, sending it reeling. Ross tore free of its slackened grip, snatching up his fallen rifle. He fired again and again, point blank, the searing bolts tearing through the hybrid's flesh. The creature collapsed, its massive body crushing a control panel as it fell. Sparks erupted from the shattered console, the shuttle's engines sputtering and dying. The deck tilted crazily as the craft, now little more than a plummeting hunk of metal, began to fall back towards the planet's surface. Ross lunged for a seat, strapping himself in as warning klaxons blared. He reached for the emergency controls, his fingers flying over the panel. With a bone-jarring clunk, the shuttle's fuel pods jettisoned, the sudden loss of mass altering the craft's trajectory. The jungle rose up to meet them, a sea of green rushing towards the viewports. Ross braced himself, teeth gritted as he counted down the seconds to impact. The crash was deafening, a cacophony of rending metal and shattering composites. The shuttle plowed through the dense foliage, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake before finally grinding to a halt, half buried in the rich loam of the jungle floor. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured hydraulics and the crackle of small fires. Ross kicked open the buckled hatch and staggered out into the humid air, his face a mask of blood and bruises. He scanned the wreckage, pulse rifle at the ready, but there was no sign of movement. The hybrids, it seemed, had not been as lucky as he had. A rustling in the undergrowth caught his attention. He spun, finger tightening on the trigger, only to find himself face to face with Orin. The Nasat scientist looked haggard, his lab coat torn and stained, but very much alive. His eyes blazed with fury as he took in the sight of the wrecked shuttle and the broken bodies of his creations. "You," he hissed, jabbing a clawed finger at Ross, "you've ruined everything." Ross leveled his rifle at Orin's chest. "It's over, Doctor. Your abominations are dead. It's time to face justice for what you've done." Orin barked a harsh laugh. "Justice? You think this ends here, human?" He shook his head, a manic gleam in his eyes. "This is only the beginning. I will start again, and next time, your precious humanity won't stand a chance." With that, the Nasat turned and fled, disappearing into the dense foliage with surprising speed. Ross lowered his rifle, jaw clenched. He couldn't let Orin escape, couldn't allow the mad scientist to start his vile experiments anew. He checked his gear, reloaded his rifle, and set off into the jungle in pursuit, Orin's footprints clear in the soft earth. The hunt was on, and Ross would not rest until the Nasat was brought to justice or put in the ground. No matter how deep into this alien jungle he had to go, no matter what horrors Orin threw at him, Ross would see this through. For the sake of his species, for the sake of every sentient being in the galaxy, he had to succeed. Failure was not an option, not now, not ever. Ross pushed through the dense foliage, ignoring the fatigue burning in his muscles and the sweat stinging his eyes. Orin's trail was still fresh, broken branches and trampled undergrowth marking the Nasat's desperate flight through the jungle. A glint of metal caught Ross's eye through the trees. He dropped into a crouch, pulse rifle at the ready as he crept forward for a better look. It was a structure, half hidden beneath a canopy of broad leaves and tangled vines. A research outpost, bearing the angular script of the Nasat. Ross's gut clenched. Orin's backup plan. He skirted the perimeter, sharp eyes picking out the sentries patrolling the compound's edge. Too many to fight through directly. He needed another way in. Ross pulled a compact surveillance drone from his pack and sent it whirring into the air. The device's camera feed flickered to life on his wrist display, giving him a bird's-eye view of the outpost's layout. There, a ventilation shaft on the roof, leading down into the heart of the facility. Minutes later, Ross was inside, crawling through the cramped ductwork with his rifle slung across his back. He followed the drone's mapping, navigating the maze of shafts until he reached a grate, looking down into a cavernous chamber below. What he saw stole the breath from his lungs. Gestation tanks, dozens of them, each containing a floating Nasat-human hybrid in varying stages of development. Some were barely more than embryos, while others looked nearly fully grown, their reptilian features and powerful builds a twisted mockery of humanity. Orin had already built his army, and Ross had led him right to it. Suppressing a surge of guilt and anger, Ross scanned the chamber. There, hunched over a console, was Orin himself. The Nasat's clawed fingers flew over the controls, his attention fully absorbed by his work. Ross slid the grate aside and dropped down behind the scientist. He drew his combat knife, the blade hissing from its sheath with a soft metallic rasp. One quick slash, and Orin's threat would be ended forever. But as he raised the knife, Orin spun, lashing out with a vicious backhand that caught Ross across the face and sent him stumbling. The Nasat pounced, tackling Ross to the ground, his reptilian bulk crushing the breath from the human's lungs. "Foolish primate," Orin hissed, spittle flecking his jaws. "Did you really think you could sneak up on me in my own domain?" Ross bucked and twisted, but Orin's strength was immense. The Nasat's claws dug into his shoulders, drawing blood. Black spots swam in Ross's vision as Orin's hands closed around his throat, squeezing. No, it couldn't end like this. Ross refused to let it. With a last surge of desperate strength, he drove his knee up into Orin's groin. The Nasat scientist howled in pain, his grip loosening for a split second. It was all the opening Ross needed. He slammed his forehead into Orin's nose, feeling the delicate bones crunch. Orin reeled back, green blood gushing down his snout. Ross pressed the advantage, raining blows on the Nasat's head and body, driving him back across the chamber. But Orin was far from finished. With a roar of pure rage he charged, his superior Nasat strength propelling him forward like a juggernaut. His fists slammed into Ross with pile-driver force, each blow threatening to shatter bone. Ross staggered under the onslaught, pain exploding through him with every impact. Ribs cracked. Blood filled his mouth. He crashed to his knees, barely clinging to consciousness as Orin loomed over him, eyes alight with savage glee. "And so it ends," the Nasat gloated, drawing back his fist for the killing blow. "Humanity's last hope, broken at my feet." Ross looked up at Orin, blood trickling from his split lips. And then, incredibly, he smiled. "Not just yet." The surge of adrenaline from the beating had triggered something deep within Ross's genetic code, a latent ability, buried in humanity's DNA, activating in a final, desperate bid for survival. Strength flooded Ross's battered limbs. His vision sharpened, the world slowing to a crawl. He could see every twitch of Orin's muscles, every shift of his weight. In that frozen moment, Ross exploded into motion. He caught Orin's descending fist and wrenched, the Nasat's arm snapping like a twig. Orin screamed, but Ross was already moving, a blur of speed and power. He unleashed a devastating flurry of strikes, fists, and feet, slamming into the Nasat with brutal, machine-like precision. Orin flew back, crashing into the tanks, the glass shattering and spilling their contents across the floor. The Nasat struggled to rise, his shattered body failing him. He looked up at Ross with eyes wide with shock and fear. What are you?" Ross stood over him, fists clenched, the rush of power still surging through his veins. "I'm human," he growled, "and that's all I need to be." He reached down, hauling Orin up by the throat. The Nasat's feet kicked feebly, his claws scrabbling at Ross's unyielding grip. "The data," Ross snarled. "Where is it?" Orin glared at him defiantly, then jerked his head towards the console. Ross dropped him and strode over to the controls, pulling a data drive from the port. The research, the genetic profiles, everything that made this abomination possible, it was all here. A harsh, rattling laugh made him spin around. Orin, broken and bleeding, had dragged himself to a different console. His claws hovered over a flashing red button. "You're too late, human," he rasped. "This facility, my life's work. If I can't have it, no one can." He slammed his fist down on the button. Instantly, alarms blared throughout the complex, emergency lights pulsing a dire warning. "Self-destruct sequence initiated," a robotic voice announced. "This facility will detonate in T-5 minutes." Ross swore, tucking the data drive into his pack. He raced for the door, but Orin's mocking laughter chased him. "Run, Ross. Run and see how far you get before—" The rest was lost as Ross sprinted down the corridors, following the emergency signage towards the surface. He could hear the thud of distant explosions as the facility began to tear itself apart. He burst out of the main doors and into the jungle, the trees whipping past as he ran. Behind him, the outpost erupted in a massive fireball, the shockwave slamming into his back and hurling him forward. Ross hit the ground hard, rolling with the impact. He came up in a crouch, ears ringing, the taste of blood and ash in his mouth. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself to his feet. It was over. The facility was destroyed, Orin was dead, and the research was secure. He had completed his mission. But as he limped back to the extraction point, the data drive a heavy weight in his pack, Ross couldn't shake a sense of unease. They had stopped Orin, yes. But at what cost? The knowledge of humanity's genetic potential was out there now. Who else might try to exploit it? What new horrors might be unleashed in the eternal quest for power and control? These questions weighed heavily on Ross's mind as he boarded the Shadow Fox, the sleek stealth ship whisking him away from Zephyria's jungle and back to the cold embrace of space. He stood on the bridge, watching the planet recede in the view screen, a dull grey orb slowly swallowed by the infinite black. Admiral Blackwell's face flickered to life on the comm screen, his weathered features etched with relief. "Damn fine work, Ross," he said gruffly. "The data you recovered, it's already being analyzed by our top scientists. With any luck, we can use Orin's own research against the Nasat." Ross merely nodded, too exhausted for words. Blackwell seemed to understand. His image winked out, replaced by the slowly spinning stars. A quiet cough behind him made Ross turn. It was the ship's medic, a stern-faced woman with knowing eyes. She gestured to the blood and bruises mottling Ross's face and body. "You should get those looked at, sir," she said softly. "I can have you patched up in no time." Ross shook his head, turning back to the viewport. "Leave it," he rasped, his voice raw with pain and fatigue. "I want to remember this. I need to." The medic hesitated, then nodded. She slipped away, leaving Ross alone with his thoughts and the cold, uncaring stars. Out there somewhere, the Shadow War raged on, and George Ross would be ready for it. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifices that had to be made, he would stand against the darkness. For the future of his species, for the very soul of humanity itself, he would fight. And he would win. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.